Hello, I'm Craig Wilde, and I'm here today with the very lovely Laura Sharpe, who has been a friend for over a decade. And I've known Laura as an entrepreneur. I've known her as a great friend, drinking buddy, crazy person. We've had some great memories we've shared together, but something very special happened just a few years ago. And this podcast is about Laura and that journey. And it's about her and her partner and their baby, and about how that baby was born with Down syndrome. And I've met Lucy, and she's an absolute superstar, but more of that in episodes to come. We're going to start today's episode with me as a friend, introducing you to Laura, and then Laura will take the journey through this first season of 6 episodes. So, Laura, howdy doody.
Hi.
So here we are, episode 1 of your journey, and I wanted to take us back right to the very beginning, which I think was about late October 2019 when you met John.
It was indeed, yes.
So tell us about John and tell us about how you met.
Tinder.
Wow.
Yeah, good old Tinder.
You didn't swipe.
I swiped the right way, which way that is, I can't remember now. And he had a work polo shirt on.
Okay.
In one of his pictures, and I knew somebody that worked at the same company. So I messaged my friend Ross, it's all your fault, Ross, as you know, and said, what's this John like? And he said, I don't work on the same floor as him, but I know him. I've been at parties with him, and he gave me a lift home. He went out of his way. He seems like a nice guy. Yeah, I'd say go for a date with him. So like I say, it's all Ross's fault. We ended up on that first date. And yeah, we just hit it off. And I was just very, very lucky to meet him at the time that I did in my life. And I think for him, it was the same. We just, our worlds collided in all of the right ways. And COVID massively fast forwarded that because, we were locked in a house together for 6 months nearly.
Weren't we all? We all, sort of those years sort of get amalgamated into maybe 1 year, but really it's 2.
It definitely was. Yeah, it was a long time. And it was a real kind of like baptism of fire for John because we'd only been together about 6 months. And not only did John and I move in together, we were thinking about doing it anyway around that time. But my mum also moved in too at the same time.
Wow. Why was that?
So mum was down in Yorkshire on her own, and I was worried about her being on her own. And, this whole talk of these lockdowns and what that meant and being, locked in your house on your own. I just couldn't imagine mum doing that, being such a sociable person like myself. I just thought, Mum, I rang her and I said, pack your bags, you're coming to stay with us. Obviously, I checked with John first. And, he was like, well, yeah, I guess. In for a penny, in for a pound. Let's do this. And, 3 months later, when mum moved back to Yorkshire, John and I literally had that conversation of, so this seems to be going okay. Shall we get married or shall we have a baby? And the general consensus was, let's have a baby. I'm not getting any younger, so.
Okay. So you've not been together very long.
No.
COVID hits. You're with your mom as well, which for a bloke, there are so many mother-in-law jokes we could do. And I happen to know your mum as well.
Yeah.
Lovely Julie. So I'm like, that possibly was intense. And maybe creating a new life might not have been the first thing we'd have thought of with mum living with us. However, you did. And
we did. We let the tyre tracks sort of fade as she left for Yorkshire.
Exactly.
Well, it was kind of like that, really. It was pretty much like, right, let's go.
Okay. So
he'll love me for telling you this.
Delicately put. So this would take us to the summer of about 2020. I think June, July time.
Yes.
And you decide to have a baby.
Mm-hmm.
So clearly birth control is out the window.
Yeah.
And it's like, right, okay, guys, practice time is over. Let's go for it.
I mean, I had no idea what I was doing. I had to start peeing on sticks and stuff. It was bizarre. I'd never done anything like that in my life. But in order to work out whether you're ovulating or not, you go and buy these sticks in the pharmacies and you pee on them and they tell you whether or not you should do it there and then or not.
Okay.
All news to me. Probably news to you, Craig.
Well, it's very news to me. I have this thing where, I have had friends of mine who have tried to conceive, and there's charts. I've got friends who've done IVF. I'm sure you have too.
Yes.
And, the thing that should have been a great fun thing for a couple, it becomes something of a chore with you need to be here now at this time and so on. But so it becomes a little bit mechanical.
Yes, it's a bit transactional, which is a bit strange. But yeah, and I think we were both keen to kind of, get pregnant as quickly as we could because it wasn't a particularly fun thing. It was quite stressful, actually, that whole process of working out, at my age, whether I was ovulating and all that kind of thing.
And Laura, how old are you now? Oh, sorry. How old were you at the time?
So I was 40 in 2019. So I'll have been 41 at this point, just turned 41.
And John? Same age?
He's 3 years younger than me, so 38 at that point.
Okay.
I think it was
so
37.
Both, as we know, men can be dads, till very late in life.
Ronnie Wood, is it the latest?
One of the Stones is having a baby and going on tour at the same time, probably. But the thing is, he's of a certain age, but more importantly, you and your female body clock is at that point of, all right, I'm now at the 40 mark and there's a lot of ticking, all the alarms, you decide to have a kid and off you go. So when was it that you got in fact, before I go to that, you were trying for a baby. Were there any other things that you were doing other than peeing on sticks that helped?
So my mum recommended reflexology. She'd spoken to her reflexologist about the fact that I was trying to get pregnant and I was struggling to work out whether I was ovulating or not. And her reflexologist recommended that I found a reflexologist locally in Newcastle who'd had training in, that sort of fertility type work. And it was absolutely fascinating. So the first time I saw her, she did more of a kind of just general sort of, getting to know me exercise. But then the next time I went, she specifically worked on my feet in specific areas that she knew would stimulate ovulation. And that's exactly what it did. Because I don't have polycystic ovaries, but I have something similar to that. I have something where I can feel when I'm ovulating. It's like a kind of cramping. And that happened mildly after that second session, which was I probably started seeing her in the September, I think. And then second session, October, third session, November, I knew exactly what was happening then. We were timing it and it was working that, she was helping to bring that ovulation. And then in the December, I saw her, so that'll have been fourth time I saw her. I said to John, right, I'm really confident that this is working. Let's try. And that was it.
And the reflexology, for those that don't know what reflexology is, but they might have heard of the word, what is reflexology? Is it massage?
Specific massage of the feet, yes, on specific points and certain movements on certain points on your feet that, people have reflexology for lots of different reasons. It's quite useful for people that have migraines or have lots of tension. And if they've got tension in their back, it can help relieve that. And it's a fascinating art, and I don't really understand how it works, to be perfectly honest. But I'm one of those people that, I do have Reiki. I am a believer in sort of, energy and spirituality and something like reflexology is kind of a mix of the two, really. It does have that very hands-on massage techniques, but it also has things around it to do with kind of more just your general well-being and stuff. And so, yeah, it was something I enjoyed doing anyway, and I found it relaxing. And as much as John is adamant that he got me pregnant, I always tell people a reflexologist did. But to be fair, it wasn't. She helped, but it was John that got me.
Definitely John that did the job. So it's when? The end of the year, aren't we? It must be December by now.
So this is December, just before Christmas. And we've done the deed, and I'm a bit suspicious. So I'm taking my temperature, like you were saying about doing the charts and stuff. I was taking my temperature, and the reflexologist was one of the people that really helped me understand this stuff.
Right.
She recommended a certain type of thermometer for me to buy that had an app attached to your phone, so it automatically updated the app when you took your temperature on a morning and started to create those charts in my phone.
Right.
And between Christmas and New Year, my temperature didn't drop, which it normally would.
Oh,
And she said, if your temperature doesn't drop, be suspicious
right.
that you might be pregnant.
So that's, I mean, we use the euphemism of a bun in the oven, and to keep good, to make the bread rise, you keep it at a constant temperature. And so
Bizarrely, going on.
bizarrely, this is where we're at. We're at this thing where we've got this like temperature, and we're like, okay, so as a human being, as a male, I obviously chance of me getting pregnant as a non-event. So it's new for me, and understanding it and going, right, okay, so clearly there is the question mark, and what did you do then? You got suspicious.
Pre-Christmas, I'd bought a lot of champagne to drink on New Year's Eve between myself, my lovely sister-in-law and my mum. I was a bit worried about that. I had in the back of my mind, that morning, my temperature hadn't gone down still after like 4 days or something. And I was thinking, this doesn't seem right. I'll just do a test. I'll just do one and and John was working in the office because obviously he was working from home still at the time. So he was in the spare room. And funnily enough, because it was Christmas and New Year, Mum was staying with us.
Right.
So Mum and I were in the other room, and I secretly sort of nipped off and did a test in the loo, and then had to keep like calm while I waited those minutes to see if it said I was pregnant or not. And it said I was pregnant.
Wow.
And
it changes colour, doesn't it?
Well, it depends.
Or is it a line?
Different ones, yeah. There's lines with crosses, and I use the digital ones where it says pregnant or not pregnant. It literally writes it out for you.
Okay.
Because they work well.
Because I when I think about pregnancy tests, because we all did those tests for COVID.
Yeah.
Think of that the line.
Two little lines.
And if it's a really heavy line, it's definitely COVID. If it's not, then you have to go and have another test.
Yeah, and it's a bit like that with pregnancy. If you have a very faint line, then because it's all it's doing is testing hormones in your urine. That's all it's doing. And when you're pregnant, you release a certain hormone that it tests, and the stronger that hormone is, the more obvious it is. Whereas I was using one that didn't do that because I didn't want that kind of question mark over it. Is there a faint line? Is there not a faint line? I used the one that literally says pregnant or not pregnant, and it said pregnant, and I was like, oh my God. So I had to keep, because obviously I didn't want Mum to be the first to know when John was in the house. I had to kind of sneak into the office and let them tell John the news while he was at work trying to do video calls and managing
so
that.
But you go into explain. You paint the picture for us. You're sneaking across the landing.
Yes.
Into the room. And what did you do? Was he at his desk?
Yeah, he was at his desk. I just held it up and went. And I was kind of gauging if he was on a call or not, and he wasn't. So he pulled his headphones off and just gave me a massive big hug, and we both just started sobbing.
See, oh no, that is very, very, very cute. And knowing John, who is basically, forgive me, John, sort of an oversized child, really, like most men, an oversized child. He, exuberant.
Yeah.
And he would have just that's it. And he is an incredible dad too.
Yes.
So it was
very excited.
It was very exciting.
Yes,
fantastic.
Yes, he was very excited, as was I, and so was Mum. And
so Mum was third to know.
So yes, Mum was in the house.
Did you go downstairs to tell her together?
No. I said, you carry on, love, and I don't know what it is about me. I'm just such a practical person. And I just was like, you carry on, love. And
I'll pop down.
I'll tell
fill her in.
And yeah. So yeah, it was.
How did you tell her?
I did the sort of typical thing that you would do at that point, and I said, I think I'm pregnant, even though I kind of knew that. I think I might be. My temperature hasn't gone down, and the test says I am, but I can't really believe that I am. And Mum was just like crying and just like, that's amazing, and
wow,
very excited as well. So yeah, I just remember that New Year's Eve just being such a bizarre evening, because I had to, watch everybody else drinking the champagne for a start, which was bizarre.
Now, knowing Laura, that's probably the most painful part of the whole thing.
Oh, it was.
Because Laura does like the bubbles, and that was it. And that would be it for like 9 months, no fizz.
And I remember my best friend Stacey saying to me a few years before that, when we were talking about, the fact that she'd had her little girl, and I did want to have a child at some point. And she said, I don't know how you'll do it, Laura. I don't know how you'll cope with the early mornings, and I don't know how you'll cope not drinking while you're pregnant. And she was quite right. Both have been very challenging. That 9 months, I tried so many non-alcoholic wines, and they're all pretty much disgusting. I think there was maybe one that was vaguely palatable. Although, to be fair, that's 3 and a bit years ago. I've got friends that are pregnant now where they've got even more choice now. And I've tasted some that are actually quite nice.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, they're not
the same
thing.
No.
So I did struggle with that. But, it taught me a lot about what do I drink, when do I drink, why do I drink? And actually, I was on I was already on a bit of a journey with that, but it has helped me kind of, look at that and reduce how much I drink and look at my health and,
Very good. Very good. So there's a process, isn't there, when you get pregnant? Once you're in that wheel, so you will have gone to your GP, who would have carried out a second test, I'm sure.
Yes, yeah.
And confirming that you were pregnant.
Yeah.
And then I believe the next thing that happens is scans.
Well, no, so your GP does the test and confirms, gets you on the folic acid. I was already taking like a pregnancy vitamin, but she was like, no, that's not got enough folic acid in it. Because of your age, get yourself on loads of folic acid.
So we have a thing here where we've established that you're grown up. You're of a certain age, and folic acid's going to be really important, and looking after yourself's going to be really important. No booze, which goes as standard really when you're pregnant. But all of those elements are coming together now. And what I want to know is, when you found out you were pregnant, other than the supplements, going to GP, was there anything else that you were doing? Like, were you exercising more, or were you doing anything, or were you just doing what you normally do? Were you eating anything different? Were you having diet, or eating special food or anything?
No, nothing different or special in that regard, really. Okay. I was definitely, I'd already cut down on alcohol because, I was conscious that could have an effect, sort of thing. So, yeah.
Well, the alcohol can sometimes help with the getting pregnant bit.
Yeah, it does. But it was, but it might have been counterproductive, sort of thing. So, I did try and cut that down. And I've always, I always try to eat healthily. And that didn't really change, as it were. And because it was COVID, I wasn't going out and eating as much as I normally do.
Yes.
The diet was probably better than it normally would be.
Having known you to be something of a food blogger over the years, then, that was a tough one.
Yeah.
So once you've confirmed with the GP and the folic acid is upped, what next?
So they book you in with the community midwife.
Right.
And that's where you go and sort of discuss the next steps, really. Like you say, you need booking in for a scan. They need to let the hospital know that you're pregnant and you need a scan at 12 weeks. They try and work out exactly how many weeks you are, that kind of thing. Try and look at your cycle and figure that stuff out with you so that they know when to book the 12-week scan at the hospital. To be perfectly honest, I can't remember a huge amount about that appointment because I was just so excited and so happy to be pregnant. And I was met with a lot of negativity. I was met with negativity about my weight, negativity about my age.
And this was from the
community midwife. And she talked about screening. And
screening.
So she said, we'll put you in for your 12-week scan. Do you want the screening? What's the screening?
Yeah.
Oh, we screen for Edwards, Patau and Down syndrome.
So Edwards syndrome,
Patau syndrome, and Down syndrome. The 3 recognised syndromes that are all to do with chromosome abnormalities.
And particular to mature mums.
Yes and no. They offer that to every single pregnant woman. You are offered to have that screening at your 12-week scan. So it's really, like I say, it's hard for me to remember what was going through my head in that appointment because a lot's happened since then. And I didn't come away and sort of make notes, which I kind of regret a little bit because actually when I look back, that appointment was really quite key in this whole journey that I've been on with Lucy because she talked in a way that, as far as I was concerned, whether she never explicitly said, do you want the screening so that you know whether or not you want to terminate your baby? She didn't say that, but she said, whatever she said about the screening gave me the impression that I would more than likely terminate if we found any of those 3 syndromes. Very naive, not educated on it, didn't have any personal experience through friends or family of anything like this. So I was kind of going on the medical professionals' sort of guidance, really. And I feel that's what that guidance was in that appointment. She might deny that. However, once I went through that process of the screening and everything was coming back high risk, although they were asked to use the words high chance now instead of risk.
Right.
But that's an ongoing issue that various charities are trying to work with the medical...
Evolving the
change
language.
that language, yeah.
Yeah.
But everything was coming back high risk. That community midwife disappeared off the face of the planet to the point where I had to change community midwives because she wasn't supporting me. She wasn't taking my calls. She wasn't checking in on me. You know, I was telling her how afraid I was and how scared I was and how, you know...
And this is
how anxious
before
I
the
was.
scan.
This is from that moment of the first scan. So she saw me, booked me in, and we didn't need to speak between that appointment in the January and booking me in for my first scan in the February, I think it was. Would have been 12 weeks? No, March.
Yeah, March, 12-week scan.
Yeah, so I didn't need to speak to her. But once I had that first scan and they found in Lucy's neck, she had a slightly higher amount of fluid or the nuchal fold was slightly bigger than it's supposed to be, which is some sort of fold at the back of the neck. And that's an indicator. It's what they call a soft marker for potential chromosome abnormalities, I think.
Right.
I don't think it's specifically Down syndrome. It can be other things. But that's why they really sort of step up the screening at that point if they see anything on the scan like that. Hers was borderline, so it was only just what they would call a potential issue.
Right.
It was borderline. It was something like if it's over 3.5 millimeters or something, then it's an issue. And I think hers was 3.4 millimeters or something. It was very borderline. I can't remember exactly, but it was something like that. And that's when they said, you know, would you like the blood test that can tell us a bit more? Well, yes, obviously, you know, I want to know more. And at this point, I had in the back of my mind, no, if there's something wrong, we're going to have to terminate this baby. And it was just the most upsetting appointment. And coming away from that, I really wanted to talk to somebody like a midwife with experience, and she just didn't want to talk to me about it.
All you got from that scan was a marker.
Yeah.
You didn't have any confirmation of anything.
Nothing.
And there was no support to say, you know,
if it's this,
there was no, it was just like, right, we've had the scan, there's a marker on it. Anyway, next.
Yeah.
It was a little bit like that.
Very much like that. And my blood pressure went through the roof.
I'm sure.
And they wouldn't let me leave the hospital until my blood pressure came down because it was dangerous being pregnant with high blood pressure. But they also, because of COVID, wouldn't let John into the hospital to be with me.
Right.
And in the end, they broke the rules and let John in, and gave me something to eat and let John talk to me, and then came and did my blood pressure again, and it had calmed down and I'd calmed down and we left. But yeah, all they did at that point was look at the scan, point out this soft marker, and then sent me in for blood tests. And so I had just had blood taken at that point, and they said it'll take a few days to come back. And that's literally within like 2 or 3 days, it came back saying, again, I should have bought my notebook because I've got it written at the back of some notebook somewhere in the house that says the exact words that what they call the screening midwives. It was a screening midwife that rang me with my results. And she said, you're 1 in so many thousand risk of having a child with Down syndrome. We have in the blood test, she said, we have been able to rule out Edwards and Pattern because you're 1 in, you know, so many million.
The ratio was so beyond plausibility.
Yeah.
So at this point, let's paint the scene. We are now, I think, at Easter.
Getting towards that point.
Going a bit east.
Yeah.
Chocolates, fond of the chocolates. And we're at Easter time and 12-week scan. And in that scan, they've done some bloods.
So they did the bloods, and that's when they rang me and said, you have a high risk of having a child with Down syndrome.
And where were you at that time, Laura?
I
Where
was at home and
at
John
home?
was working from home, and and it was just
Did you have mum back again for Easter?
no. It was because it was before Easter when they rang with this.
Okay.
It was in March, and it was just my brain was spinning, and I wasn't physically upset after that call. It was more of like my brain, I couldn't kind of think straight, if you know what I mean, and everything was just spinning around. And she said, you can either book in for an amniocentesis or you can go privately for an IPT testing. I mean, this is all of these terms at this point. I had no idea what they were talking about.
So now you know, and for the aid of anybody listening, those two tests, what are they?
So amniocentesis is where they put a needle into the fluid in the placenta and pull some of that fluid out and test it for... So that fluid can tell them if that child has any chromosomal abnormalities and that kind of thing. I don't know what else it tests for, but I know it tests for Down syndrome. So that's quite invasive and comes with a reasonably high risk of miscarriage. So you have to weigh that up. So I was weighing the two things up really with that. I am a total wuss with a very low pain threshold.
I'm in that club too.
And at my age, with this being my first ever pregnancy, miscarriage was something that terrified me. And therefore, if there was another option that didn't involve all of that, I was going to go with it. So I asked her what NIPT testing was, and she said it's a very simple blood test they do, and they can test your blood. That your baby's genetic makeup is running through your bloodstream. So they can look at your blood to determine whether you... But she said it's not as accurate. You know, it doesn't come with the same level of accuracy. So the amniocentesis, or the CVS, I think it's called. And so they're two needle tests in the tummy. Okay. One's slightly different to the other. They are like 99% accurate, I think, or something like that. Whereas NIPT is a lot lower than that. I don't know what they say it is. It's in the 80s, I think. It's 80-something% accurate. It's now available on the NHS, which is a whole other episode about the moral, the moral issues around the fact that test is very quick and easy to do. Whereas amniocentesis is something that some people are put off doing, so may not find out their child has Down syndrome until their child is born. Whereas if NIPT testing is available to everybody can easily test with more accuracy than those original blood tests they do at the 12-week scan. So it's a debate that I'd love to get a guest on another episode to debate that one, because Sally Phillips, who was an actress in Bridget Jones, is it Sally Phillips? We might have to edit. Sally Phillips? I think it's Sally Phillips. She was in Bridget Jones. So Sally Phillips has done a documentary looking at the introduction of the NIPT testing in the UK. And I would love to get her on at some point and have a chat with her about it. She has a son who has Down syndrome.
Right.
And that comes up again, actually, because we watched that documentary at a certain point in the process. But anyway, so NIPT testing wasn't available on the NHS. We had to go private. It wasn't silly money. It was, I think it was less than £1,000.
Right. Still not a small amount.
No, it wasn't. It was a fair few £100s, and we had to seriously think about it. At this point in the process, I wasn't really thinking about keeping this baby. I was thinking about what are we establishing is wrong here? Will we need to terminate? That was going through my mind, and I needed to know. So but John was of a different opinion even at that point. He said it didn't matter to him either way. Whatever was happening, that was his baby, and he would love that baby. Whereas I was just more naive really about, the bigger world. I think I'd just been, closeted a little bit from it and didn't really understand, what went on really. So we went for the NIPT testing and it came back inconclusive. And that took 10 days for that. Right. And at that appointment, we had a 4D scan and we saw much more of our baby's face. We didn't know if our baby was male or female. We didn't know anything more than just looking at that baby's face in 4D. and falling in love with that baby at that point whilst having my blood drawn. It's a multitasking appointment. I'm having my blood drawn, having the, looking at the baby, doing a 4D scan. So again, they were looking for soft markers and couldn't see any other than the nuchal fold. But even that, they said, I think they came back with an even smaller measurement than the original midwife at the 12-week scan had come back with. So it was a bit like, are you sure? Are you just, because at this point, a lot of people were saying to me, well, the blood tests come back high risk, not high chance, should be high chance. It came back saying high risk because of my age, potentially, because they look at they do a blood test, but they look at they do some kind of weird calculation with your age and your weight and all this stuff. So all that stuff was going against me, was how I felt. And maybe this baby doesn't have Down syndrome. I don't know. I knew it didn't. I knew the baby wouldn't have Edwards or Patta at that point, but I didn't know. Right. It was still a bit up in the air, but I felt like maybe not from the scans that they were doing and what they were saying to me. And then it came back inconclusive and they said, you can come in and have the blood test done again. We won't do another scan, but we'll do another blood test. Did that. Another 10 days passed. So we're now like 20 days past my initial 12-week scan. So we're nearly a month really past. So we're into April. Inconclusive again. Absolute devastation. What do we do now? Because I really wanted to know at this point. John was a bit like, oh, maybe we should just leave it, Laura. This isn't working. Let's just, not keep trying to find this out. And I said, let me ring the screening midwife and see what she says. So I rang the screening midwife at the screening midwife at the RVI, who was lovely, actually. And she said, she really calmed me down. I was in a bit of a state. And she calmed me down and she said, look, Laura, if you really want to know, you need to come in for an amniocentesis. We can do one this afternoon, or you'll have to wait till after the Easter break. Hey. This was the Tuesday before the Good Friday. So I went in and Did
you go alone?
Well, it was John's last day in his previous role at work. He didn't feel he could not turn up for that. And we were already partway through the day. He was already at work and he needed to go and drop his equipment off for the for them because he was leaving. So he just wanted to do that and get rid. And I was like, and I spoke to one of my friends and she said, Laura, just pull your big girl pants up and get on with it. And I did. And I was lucky that we had a fantastic consultant who greeted
Where were you?
me.
Which hospital were you?
So in the RVI, in the FMU unit.
So that's the Royal Victoria Infirmary here in Newcastle upon Tyne.
Yes. And I was under the care of the fetal medicine unit. So it's a specific unit to look at, babies and their growth and all the rest of it and what's happening with them. So it's like opposite where all the mums sit waiting to have their scans, which I don't believe is the best thing, because if you're going in with potential issues with that baby, you're seeing lots of very pregnant women waiting for scans and things, and it's not ideal for your hormones and regulating your emotions. I actually think it should be in a slightly different part of the hospital. I understand why it is where it is. It all makes sense. They're all together and the midwives probably cross over and stuff. But from my point of view as a patient, I found it really difficult seeing all the very heavily pregnant mums when I was very early on in my pregnancy, with a lot of potential problems. So Gareth Waring greeted me, and he was a consultant in the fetal medicine unit, and he was very reassuring, very calming, just had a brilliant nature and was just so good with me, especially because I'd come in on my own. And I think the screening midwife had probably explained to him what a state I was in, and I didn't really want to be coming in on my own, but I have to. So he kind of metaphorically held my hand through the process. And the first thing he did was do his own sort of scan and get a feel for what he was dealing with. And the first news he gave me was, placenta is front attached, Laura. Are you aware of that? I said, no, what does that mean?
Yeah, what does that mean, Laura? What does it mean a placenta is front attached?
It normally attaches to the back of your womb.
Right.
It can sometimes attach to the bottom, which isn't great either. I think that's really complicated if it does that. But mine was attached to the front, and that meant he couldn't safely do the amniocentesis. So he had to explain the different test he was going to do, which uses a bigger needle. Basically,
right. Okay.
The fluid in a different way. I don't know the ins and outs, but it's a slightly different test, and it uses a bigger needle, and I was absolutely terrified, and he practically held my hand while he did it. I'm sure there was a midwife holding my hand, and Gareth was talking me through everything he was doing. And this is going to feel a bit uncomfortable, Laura, but you're going to be okay. You know, they numb things and they do all that.
Yeah.
You don't feel it necessarily, but it isn't pleasant and it was scary, but I did it. And they said, we'll try and get the results back as quickly as we can. We're conscious that it's a bank holiday coming up. We don't really want to leave you, you know, pondering over the bank holiday. If we can help it, we will ask them to do. So they send the test over to the Life Centre in Newcastle.
Okay.
So they do a lot of genetic testing there. I don't know what the ins and outs of what the Life Centre does, but
I believe it's the Centre for Genetics in the Northeast.
So yeah, one of the things they do is they take. I wouldn't have thought that an organisation like that would be testing the hospital's stuff, but they were. It was quite fascinating to me that's where my sample went. And I got a phone call on the Thursday at 4:00 before the Good Friday. So within 2 days, I got a phone call from another consultant in fetal medicine because Gareth wasn't around that day.
Right.
To give me the result. Phone rings, private number, heart stops. Oh my God, this could be the hospital ringing with my results. John was second day in his brand new job, or first day in his brand new job. He might have had the day off in between. But so I was at home on my own. Phone rings. Hello? Oh, hello, it's so-and-so from the RVI. I'm just ringing with your results. Okay. I'm sorry to tell you, but your baby does have Down syndrome.
Right.
Oh my God. Okay. Do you have any questions?
Yeah. It's a lot to take in.
And he said, "What do you have any questions?" I said, I don't know. And he said, well, what are you wanting to do? And I said, what do you mean? He said, do you want to carry on or do you want to terminate? We need to know quickly. This needs to be dealt with quickly. Well, I need to speak to my partner for a start. Okay. And I started getting a bit like, hang on a minute, you're a bit of a... I wasn't a fan of his temperament, the way he was coming across. So, but I said, all right, stop, hang on a minute, let me just think. I do have a question. What if we terminated this baby because they have Down syndrome? Because I believe that's what I'm supposed to do, having gone through this process. And we tried again, but having some genetic testing done ourselves, maybe some, not IVF, but some sort of support through the process because this has happened. Well, you're just swapping one problem for another. Right. So are you telling me that that's not an option? Well, I wouldn't recommend it. Right. So what do you want to do then? I said, well, I don't know. And he said, well, you'll just have to ring us on Tuesday morning and tell us if you would like to be booked in for a termination or you would like to carry on. Goodbye. And put the phone down. The call was literally 2.5, 3 minutes.
Wow.
It was very fast. And of course, I was just hysterical. I rang John.
Jeez.
He got a speeding ticket coming home.
Wow.
But he was able to do a speed awareness course, so that was good.
Good. Every cloud. Yeah.
Every cloud. So he came rushing home and we just were in shock, really. Even though it was a possibility, we were still in shock, I think, from getting the actual result.
John so far has been, I don't care. Now it's been spelt out. Mm-hmm. What was his view?
So John it was difficult for John to express his opinion because he very quickly said, it's your body, Laura. Yes, it's our baby, but it's your body. And we don't know what effect this could have on your body. We don't know, at the end of the day, you are the person that is rearing this child effectively, if you want to put it in animalistic terms.
Indeed.
You are going to bring this baby into the world, and therefore I don't feel it's my place to tell you what to do in this situation. And I said, well, I would still like your opinion. And he said, well, as I've said before, it doesn't make any difference to me. That is my baby, and I will love that baby no matter what.
See, that's the kind of, gosh, honestly, any women out there listening today will be like, damn, all the good ones get taken. Because he sounds a smasher. I mean, I know he's a smasher. I've met him. But conversely, yes, it's your body, it's your baby, but what are you thinking now? Because you're okay, I've got the support of my partner, I am going to have a Down syndrome baby, but now I know...
Baby with Down syndrome.
Oh, sorry, a baby with Down syndrome. What am I going to do? Because it's your body, as it's been rightly pointed out.
Mm-hmm.
Possibilities are possibilities,
Mm-hmm.
but now it's a fact. What went through your mind?
Fear. I was terrified. I was confused. I was angry. I was upset.
Can we just
all
break
of those
things? So fear. What were you scared of?
I was terrified of the unknown. I had absolutely no idea what it would be like to have a child with Down syndrome. I didn't, like I said before, I had no personal experience in my life, really. My friend Beverly would disagree with that because I had met her and her son quite a few years earlier, who has Down syndrome, who is in his late teens now. And she is a family friend. And, but those things don't come into your mind. I couldn't think of anybody in my sort of circle where I could turn and say, what do I do here? Or, because I think I'm the sort of person where I'm very strong-willed. I'm very, focused person. I know my own mind. I'm good at making decisions. But when it's a big thing, I don't necessarily look for people's opinions, but I look for some guidance. I look for support, and I look for people to help me to make my own decision, really, rather than, going with somebody else's opinion. So I'd normally would, reach out to friends and family and that kind of thing. But I did that, but everybody was a bit like, I don't know what to say. I literally don't know what to say to you, Laura. Like, this is, a massive thing. And, nobody ever, it's funny because lots of people talk about people saying, I'm really sorry. Like, the guy that delivered the news from the RVI saying, I'm very sorry to tell you. Nobody actually in my friends and family network did that. And I don't think they did that consciously. I don't think they thought we mustn't say, because it is a thing in the sort of the support networks around Down syndrome that, we try and avoid that word sorry. We try and stop people saying it. But I didn't need to do that because nobody really said it. They just were all like, this is massive and this is really up to you and John need to sit down and talk about it and decide for yourselves what is right for you. That's why there is this choice, and that's why there's this big debate in America, isn't there? Because, if that choice is taken away from you, how hard is that? It's hard to make the choice, but at least we have the opportunity to make the choice. And, we did need, that's what everybody told us to do, and that's what we did. We basically just sat down and just talked and talked and talked. The worst thing you do in that situation is Google baby.
Indeed.
Down
Before we go
baby.
to Googling about it, you said you were terrified, fear, but you also said you were angry. Why were you angry?
Why me? It's that simple reaction to anything that is difficult in your life, I think, isn't it? We all question that. Why me? When you're having to get yourself through something really tough or make a really difficult decision. Why am I having to do this? Why me? And I was angry because I'd gone through a lot personally prior to this. My dad was diagnosed with early onset Alzheimer's, age 55, as you know, Craig.
I do indeed, yes.
Tony, bless him. And, I'd struggled a lot with that and had a lot of heartache and a lot of difficult times. And at this point, Dad had already been in a home for about 18 months, coming up 2 years. And, so I wasn't so directly affected by my dad having Alzheimer's on a day-to-day basis at this point, but I had lived through a lot of, difficult times. So I think the anger came from that, I've already had all this to deal with at quite a young age. How old was I when Dad was diagnosed? Like I was 30 when Dad was diagnosed. I was quite young, and it was a big thing to deal with. And I think I was angry that this was being piled on top of me as well as everything I'd already been through. And I think that's where the anger came from, because I already had a lot of anger about Dad's illness anyway.
Right.
I had a lot of anger about what I'd had to deal with up to that point, that, nobody... Those cards are just played out for you. Nobody's put that on me. It's just life's dealt me those cards, and I was a bit angry already about that. So I did feel angry that I was, facing even more
difficult challenges.
Potentially, yeah.
So you talked a lot. You did a fair bit of Googling, looking up nightmares.
Mm-hmm.
It's a bit like when they say, don't look at your illness.
Yeah.
Because
really, it's the same thing, really. It just brings all of this sort of, horrible medical stuff up that.
And I remember years ago joining a book club, and one of the things I bought was a medical dictionary.
Mm.
And by the end of reading just a couple of pages, I'd been dead for 10 years. So I think it's a little bit like that. It's like it's all the horror stories.
Yeah.
So a lot of talk.
Mm.
Who did you talk to? And what about family? You're very close to you. You've got a brother and a sister-in-law, and you're very close to them and very close to mum. What were their opinions? What were they saying?
Like I say, they were all of the same opinion. This is, we're here for you, but this is your thing. We can't guide you on this. We don't want to give our opinions. We just want you to know that we are there for you no matter what happens. We love you, and we want you and John to make the decision that is right for you and John. And that's what, that is the right thing to say to people in that situation, I think, really.
Because it is a lot, any child, any parent will say they're a lifelong commitment.
Mm-hmm.
With a child who is living with Down syndrome, those challenges rephrase that. The challenges of a child with Down syndrome may be greater and more intense, and mean that your responsibility as a parent is much longer, rather than, throwing out your kids at 18, get yourself to uni or whatever.
My mum, I did go to uni, and my mum, but my mum will say, I'm 45 and she still worries about me even if I don't live with her. It is a lifelong responsibility anyway. And I think, it's your attitude. What I've learned over the last 3 years is it's all about your attitude towards that and how you embrace that, really. But it was difficult for them to give an opinion, really, because, some of them might have been thinking, I don't want this for Laura. And others might have been thinking, well, this could be the making of Laura, And I think probably if I was to ask my friends and family to be completely honest, there would probably be a 50-50 split on that, I guess. One of my best friends that I turned to, Stacey, is the lady that I'm talking about, who her husband is related to a lovely lady called Beverly Dean MBE. And Beverly has a son, like I say, who has Down syndrome, who's in his late teens now. And when I reached out to Stacey, that was the first thing she said. She reminded me that I know Beverly, speak to Beverly.
Yeah.
And that was the first thing, one of the first things I did. I rang Beverly and said, this is happening, Beverly. I know I don't really know you very well, but,
help.
Can you help? And she just talked about, what joy William has brought to her family and to herself personally, and the relationship they have and how close they are. And, she does have another son, and the kind of the family bonds and how loved William is, and what a full life he has, and kind of talked to me about, because at that point William was probably in his mid-teens. She talked about the kind of the sort of the stuff that she'd gone through with William in a very open and frank way of, this was a challenge, this was great, this was more difficult, this, schooling's been fantastic, he's got some good friends, all that. So, but then, he's got a problem with his hearing, so that, he's had to go through quite a lot with that. But, even at that point, I was already learning terms like Makaton. What's Makaton? Oh, Makaton's a sign language you use that's simplified from BSL, and it's used with words. It's not just a replacement for language. It's a sign language that you use while speaking, and it helps a child to understand what you're saying. It helps a child to communicate with you. And ultimately, it helps a child to learn to talk. And that's what we've done with Lucy from day one. And even on that call, I can remember Beverly mentioning Makaton. It's little things like that have actually had a massive impact on how we've managed to get through the last 3 years and help Lucy to be who she is today, and for us to feel comfortable in, everything we're doing with her and helping her. So Beverly just talked about her life, really, and talked me through, gave me that feeling of not being, there's no need to be too afraid, and put me on to the one of the board members at Down Syndrome Northeast.
Okay, so
Caroline Turner.
Down Syndrome Northeast.
Mm.
I am aware through yourself that there are lots of support networks.
Yes.
And I was going to get to that. So
there's multinational online support networks, there's national online and offline support networks, and then there's local online and offline support networks.
So there is this
through Down Syndrome.
Quite a web of support that you can access should you find yourself as a parent in this position. And of course, you were seeking all this advice and support so that you could make that decision for you as potential parents. Yeah. Will we go ahead?
Yeah, I was wanting to make an informed decision, and I was having, I was asking Beverly to be open and honest and frank with me. And I said, I'm going to be the same. And I did have those, that open discussion with her about, we are trying to make a decision here. We haven't decided we're carrying on. We're making a decision whether or not we're carrying on. And she was, and I know from mentoring families now myself that we're absolutely fine with that, because it's a thought process. If you have a prenatal diagnosis, it's a thought process everybody will go through, and it's just, it's something that happens, and everybody has that right to choose, and the people that choose not to continue, I totally understand. It is a very personal thing. I very quickly realised that I would probably have a fantastically strong support network, not just from the way that our friends and family reacted to the news, that nobody was overly negative and everybody was very supportive.
So Laura, we have, we've got pregnant. We have, via reflexology, allegedly, we have
John's help.
He did. I don't know what he was there. Joking, John, if you're listening. And then we've had our 12-week scan. We've had a number of tests.
Mm-hmm.
And we've now got confirmation that you are, in fact, potentially having a child who, should you decide to go to term, will have Down syndrome.
Yeah.
And you've been reaching out to numerous people through various networks, from family, friends, and so on, and the Northeast Down Syndrome Network. If I did that right?
Down Syndrome Northeast.
Down Syndrome Northeast. The DSNE. There knew there'd be an acronym somewhere. And we have some significant people that you connect with, such as Eleanor and, I believe, Lindsay.
Yes. So after I'd spoken to Beverly, she put me on to Caroline Turner, who is on the board at Down Syndrome Northeast at the time. And the conversation went very similarly to Beverly's conversation. Her son was younger than Beverly's son, but at the same time, very kind of, supportive and positive conversation that there's no need to feel so frightened. It does come with its challenges, but at the same time, this is we have a very loving family. All of our friends and family and the wider community are very supportive towards us, and very inclusive, and all of that, all of those words that you need to hear at that point. I think if you're wanting to carry on, they were, it was all very positive. And I said to Caroline, well, I've heard that, there's, that children with Down syndrome can often have problems with the heart. Oh, yes. There's a lady called Eleanor that you may or may not have come across already. Her daughter has Down syndrome and she has a heart condition. I can put you in touch with her. And I said, yes, that would be great. And also, there's a family who just had a little boy. He was born in 2019. So was it 2019 or was it 2020? It's 2020, turns 4 next month. So she said there's a family local to you with a little boy who was only just born last year. I can put you in touch with them. And that was my friend Lindsay, who has become, both Eleanor and Lindsay and Caroline and Beverly have all become very good friends. And through this, it turned out I knew Eleanor through a friend of a friend as well. So it was that kind of spooky, like you were talking about the web, that I already kind of had, like with the link with Beverly, and I also had a link with Eleanor. I already kind of had my own support network without even realising it was there. But Caroline helped me to bring it together, really. And I didn't speak to Eleanor or Lindsay at that point. I spoke to Beverly, I spoke to Caroline, and they both put me in touch with a lady who used to run a charity in Hexham, Helen Taylor, she, again, you know, another person to talk to with a child with Down syndrome who was, again, a different age. I think he was in between the other two boys' ages. So it was just giving me that sort of full picture of what these families, you know, how they were living, what challenges they were facing, and just, like I say, helping me to make an informed decision. And I spoke to all three of them at length, with John sat next to me on the sofa, kind of trying to half hear the conversation, but I didn't have them on loudspeaker, so he was getting bits and not others, but also kind of zoning in and out of it because it was a lot of conversation that I was having. And at the end of that, I had a few notes of things that they'd said, you need to go and look at this, you need to go and see this, you need to go and read this. Don't just Google it. They all said, don't just Google it. And they all gave me resources on the internet for me to go and do more reading around and that kind of thing. And that's how I discovered the charity Positive About Down Syndrome, which is a national charity that Caroline now works for as well. She helps to coordinate the conversations with the maternity units around the country, around the language that they use and the positivity and that kind of thing. So I discovered Positive About Down Syndrome, very quickly joined a Facebook group that they ran that was for people with a prenatal diagnosis, for expectant mothers, basically. And they were very supportive and very informative and very chatty. You know, there was volunteers that I could talk to online. And by the end of that bank holiday weekend, I already had like a national network of people that I could call on with experience of having a child with Down syndrome to support me and give me advice and all the rest of it. And I think that a lot of that helped us make the decision, because that helped, because as much as John and I were discussing it, I did take on board what he said about it being, to a certain extent, being my decision. And I needed to feel confident in that decision. So I needed to feel that I'd done that research myself and gone out and listen to what people had to say, and that's what we did.
So, Laura, that's a lot. Been fantastic to learn so far, but in the next episode, we'll learn exactly what decision you made. I mean, it might be quite obvious to some, but we'll talk about...
Oh, I'm not very good at keeping secrets, am I?
Not really, but we'll talk about the diagnosis, and we'll talk about some of those fantastic networks that you've engaged with and the support, and will they, won't they? We'll find out more in the next episode. I'm very excited by this journey. I hope our listeners are equally excited, because this program is about sharing your story in the hope that it will inform and support others who may be going through a similar journey themselves.
That's exactly what I'm looking to do, Craig.
Awesome. This has been Tea and 21 with
Laura Sharpe
and me, Craig Wilde. Catch you next time.
Bye.
Bye. There you go.
Niltoni Broadcast Network, NBN. Popcorn for your ears.